Film has become known as a film within a film. But actually it is a film within a film within a film, in the sense that, many of the people that you see on screen are actually playing themselves. I mean, the director's assistants were Mrinal Sen's assistants. The camera assistants were actual camera assistants. And in an informal sort of way, many of the people of that village became part of the extended unit. So therefore, the conflict that is shown in the film didn't actually happen. For example, that old mansion, that is where we were actually, a lot of us, including Smita, it was difficult, but that is where we lived throughout the shooting of the film. So a lot of things, came together.
One thing that anybody else has any questions? Yes, Ramna.
Sir, about the song which is being sung in the beginning, it looked as if it was a peasant song or something. I think Salil Chaudhary.
Yes, well, it is an Indian People's Theatre Association song. It is an IPTA song. As you probably know, Mrinal Sen was never a member of the party. That is to say, he was never a member of the Communist Party, but he came from the IPTA movement. So did his wife, Geeta, who plays the widow in the house. So yes, I mean, Salil Chaudhary did the music for many of his films, and his background was also IPTA. But I was saying, yes, most of us lived in that broken down building, and we have, I have to say, very happy memories of it. Those of us who are still around. When one sees the film after 40 years, one of the things anybody associated with the film thinks about is that actually many of the people are not there anymore. So that's, I wouldn't say that's a sad feeling, but it's a strange kind of feeling. You see.
Lots of questions, yes.
No, I just like to ask, your view on this, because I didn't answer this. This is, I thought Mrinal Sen's strong part of camera that he uses is his quick characterizing. And I mean, for example, his film which I remember most is Agdin Protirin. Now in Agdin Protirin, what he does is, in just the first 5 minutes, all the characters. And I think, if I'm not wrong, his use of the camera, which is done in this film also, that it stays on the character for some time, and then without the sound maybe, or with or something. So I just wanted to know whether this is really Vinas Babu's technique.
Well, it is difficult. It's a very interesting issue. But it's difficult to, give a quick response to that. As we know, Ektin Pratitin, which you referred to, was the film he made immediately before Akaler Shandhaney. But in general, I think it is fair to say that Mrinal Sen was an eclectic sort of person. He jumped from format to format. He made films in Bangla, he made films in Oriya, in Telugu, in Hindi. So he was constantly exploring and experimenting. The same applies to his camera techniques. Agdin Protitin, where he deals with disappearance. Later, much later, he dealt with disappearance again in Ek Din Achanak. As far as I remember, in Agdin Protitin, his camera was still, silent, like a detached third party observing. Part of that is there in Akal, but there is also, a lot of restlessness in Akal. So, I don't know whether I've been able to answer your question satisfactorily, but that's what I feel.
Well, interesting you mentioned about that because not many may know that he was very, very prolific in the 70s. And this was your second film with him.
With him.
Patarik was around 73, 74, The Foot Soldier.
Yes, it was 72, 73. Padatik, The Foot Soldier, was part of what has become known as Mrinal Sen's Calcutta trilogy. At that time, there was also Rai's Calcutta trilogy, and I worked in the first film of Rai's trilogy. Mrinal Sen's trilogy was much more explicitly political, much more restless. That was, as you know, a turbulent time in Calcutta and West Bengal. That was the time of the extreme left movement. And Mrinal Sen expressed his reactions to that in his trilogy. In fact, in the third film, The Foot Soldier, he was asking questions about the extreme left movement. I'm going outside of this to say that was a time when the filmmakers who are flagged as the great filmmakers, Rai, Sen, Hrithik, Khatak, all their films are political. All their films. Some directly, some indirectly. But they are films which are socially conscious. One regrets the disappearance of that. I mean, personally, I regret the disappearance of that kind of cinema. Now, I mean, why just talk of these three? There was Sham Benegal, there was Govind Nihalani, there was Syed Mirza, all of them were making social, political films.
There was also certain humanness in their politics. I mean, on the face of it, they may not be extremely political films, but under the surface they were. But at the same time, there was a certain humanness which is missing in cinema by and large today.
Yes, well, I mean, that will lead us into a discussion which could last the whole
Yes.
night.
So let's come back to
Why
Mrinal Sen
people
and Patarik. So, from 73 to almost 82, 83, I think every year pretty much he made a film. So between 73 and 80, he also launched Mithun Chakravarti, by the way, in Regaya, for which he won the national award. Was there a lot of change in his style, in his thinking, in his filmmaking from 73 to Akaler 80?
Again, Sachin, I am afraid to say the wrong thing, so I think I'll skip this question. There's a question at the back there.
So, having worked with both Mr. Sachin Ray and Mrinal Sen, can you tell your experience difference in very brief? I know it will be very, very fast.
Yeah, I was afraid that this question would crop up.
And I was
because-
cautiously avoiding that.
Because
You don't answer.
No. See, the thing is that I've been asked this question innumerable times, and I am not a great one for comparison. You see, I think, I may be wrong, I think what happens is that when you do not go deep into a person's work, when you do not think about, analyze, deconstruct his work,
My
comparison is sort of an easy way out. Was he better, or was X better, or was Y better? My experience in brief, I would say that Rai was a much more planned, pre-planned kind of filmmaker. Everything was planned beforehand. Mrinal Sen was, as I said, used improvisation a lot. I mean, there's one long scene between Smita and me where, he was chatting with us, the unit was setting up the camera, and when the unit said, that the shot is ready, he said, okay, let's shoot. So I said, we don't have dialogue. So he said, doesn't matter, you know what it is about, just improvise. So that's happened more than once. The first film I did with him, Padatik, 2 days, 3 days before the shooting was going to wrap, nobody knew, including Mrinal Sen himself, how the film would end. So that was the kind of, I mean, there was a great deal of excitement in working in that manner as well.
One more point in this film which I saw, seeing also after 30 years maybe. This time it was the projection of how difficult filmmaking is. The physical part of it, how the camera, how the lights, how the game. That I think was well projected in this film.
Yes, it was, particularly if you remember that it was a fairly, elaborate kind of film, elaborate in the sense of a large cast and so on. And you have to remember that he had to make his films on very, very low budgets. He wasn't a commercial filmmaker. So you're right, filmmaking was by no means easy.
To ask you, in your portrayal as a director, how much of it was influenced by Mr. Mrinal Sen himself? Because having interacted with him, this was, I think, the second film with him. Was it avoidable when you're portraying a director on screen to kind of, avoid the?
Okay, I don't know whether you all heard the question, but the question is how much of his acting was influenced by Mrinal Sen himself as a director?
Well, the chain smoking certainly was. Because although I was a smoker at that time, I wasn't a chain smoker. So that certainly was, and stealing other people's matchboxes was also influenced by him. Otherwise, not really. Very different kind of person.
Sir, was this film released in the theatre and how was the response?
Yes, it was released, and the response was, it wasn't like houseful sort of response, but the response was good, was very good. Because one of the things was that Mrinal Sen, before that, in the Calcutta trilogy, for example, had experimented with non-narrative forms, which the general audience found sometimes a little difficult to take or to absorb. And here he came back with even though it was a film within a film, he came back with a relatively simple to comprehend narrative form. So it struck a chord with audiences, apart of course from the social and political implications.
Just like to say one thing. Even though the story is about the 1950s violence, brings out the 1980s so beautifully.
Yeah, well, that was the whole. That is why it's a film within a film. The contradictions of a film unit trying to make a film on the famine and thereby almost causing a famine in the village. Those are true. Those of us who've been in the industry for long enough know these realities.
His casting choices were always very interesting, including, as I mentioned, Mrinal Chakravarti coming out of the blue in Regaya. Smita Patil, any idea how did she come into the picture?
Well, Mrinal had before that, of course, seen Shyam's film, Bhumika. So he was taken with Smita, wanted Smita very much. But of course, one possible stumbling block was the fact that Smita did not speak Bangla. So it's dubbed by someone, Kajal Chaudhary, that's right, who was an actor also at that time. It's dubbed, but otherwise, let me narrate an anecdote. As I said, all of us lived in this broken down building, which was still inhabited by the extended family that owned it. And Smita was living with this family in the inner quarters with the women. Now, Mrinal Sen is from, as many of you might know, Mrinal Sen is from East Bengal. And therefore, he is very, very fond, or was very, very fond of fish, particularly the hills, and particularly the hilsa, cooked in mustard oil. And there is Smita, who's a Maharashtrian, vegetarian woman faced with this fish gulping, fish devouring crowd. So ultimately, she had to cook her own food, poor girl. I mean, get vegetables from wherever and cook for herself. So that's just I mean, there are many such anecdotes that one can